Jacob had lived on that quiet piece of Arizona land for more than 10 years, and every evening followed the same peaceful rhythm. He checked the fences, counted the horses, made sure the water buckets were full, and walked the length of the ranch before the sky grew dark. He liked the calm. He liked the silence. It was the kind of life where a man heard his own footsteps more clearly than the voices of other people. And for Jacob, that had always been enough. He didn't expect anything to change. He didn't even imagine it could. But one cold evening, things changed in a way he never saw coming. He was walking back from the far corral when he noticed something strange near the barn. At first, he thought it was just a shadow. Maybe a blanket someone had left hanging on the fence. But the shadow moved. A hand shifted slightly. Then he heard the soft sound of breathing, slow and tired. Jacob paused, unsure if he should step closer or give the figure space. He waited for a moment, listening to the wind blowing dust across the open ground. Finally, he took a slow step forward and spoke in a calm, gentle voice. "Ma'am? Are you all right?" The figure tensed, as if unsure whether to run or collapse. Then a young woman lifted her head, her dark hair falling across her face, her eyes sharp but tired. She wore clothes that had clearly faced long days of travel, dusty, worn, and torn at the hem. Jacob recognized the patterns on her dress, the beadwork on her earrings. She was Apache, but she didn't look dangerous at all. She looked exhausted, hungry, and cold. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she watched him carefully, as if studying every movement he made. Jacob slowly lowered his hands to show he meant no harm. He had met people from her tribe before during trading trips. He knew enough to respect their space and their fear of strangers who didn't understand them. "You look like you need help," he said quietly. Still, she didn't move. Jacob realized she must have been hiding for at least a few hours, maybe longer. He looked closer and saw that her shoes were worn thin, and her feet shook from the cold. A heavier wind picked up, brushing sand against the barn walls. The winter desert night was coming fast, and Jacob knew it could turn dangerously cold. "I've got water inside," he said, "and food. You're welcome to rest if you need to." The woman blinked slowly, as if trying to decide whether she could trust him. He didn't rush her. Jacob simply stepped back a little, giving her space, and pointed to his cabin a short distance away. A warm light shone from the window, soft, steady, inviting. She looked at the cabin, then at him, then back at the cabin. Another blast of cold wind hit her, and finally her legs gave in. She caught herself on the edge of the barn, breathing hard. Jacob stepped forward just enough to offer support. She didn't take his hand, but she didn't pull away either. That was enough. He walked beside her as she slowly followed him toward the cabin. She moved with careful steps, as though every muscle ached. Jacob didn't ask questions. He could see she was tired beyond words. Inside the cabin, he quickly lit another lamp, warming the room with a soft glow. He fetched a clean cup of water from a clay jug and placed it gently on the table. She reached for it with slightly shaking hands and drank slowly, as if every swallow returned a little strength to her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and hoarse. Jacob nodded. "You're welcome. My name's Jacob." She looked at him again, her eyes alert despite her exhaustion. She seemed to be deciding whether to speak her own name. After a long moment, she said, "Naya." Jacob gave a small smile. "Nice to meet you, Naya." She lowered her gaze. Not used to such easy kindness from a stranger. He could tell she was still tense, unsure of his intentions. So he moved slowly, giving her the comfort of space and silence. He placed a plate of warm cornbread and beans on the table. Naya hesitated, then took a small bite, watching him as though waiting to see if he would demand something in return. But Jacob simply leaned against the counter and let her eat peacefully. After she finished, she spoke again, her voice steadier now. "Storm coming." Jacob nodded. "Yes. You shouldn't be outside in weather like that. You can stay here tonight." Her eyes widened slightly. "Stay. Here?" He pointed to his bed. "You can sleep there. I'll take the floor. Naya stared at him for a long time, clearly confused. Many people she had met in the past acted with suspicion or harshness toward her people. But this rancher showed only simple, honest respect. That was strange to her. Almost unbelievable. You give me your bed? She asked softly. Jacob shrugged. You need it more than I do. A gust of wind struck the window, shaking the wooden frame. The storm had arrived earlier than expected, and the air outside grew colder by the minute. Naya looked toward the sound, then back at Jacob. She wrapped her arms around herself, though the warmth of the cabin was already easing the chill in her bones. You not afraid of me? She asked, almost in a whisper, as if unsure whether the question was allowed. No, Jacob replied simply. There's nothing to fear. Naya lowered her gaze, her expression thoughtful. She wasn't used to such calm answers. She wasn't used to anyone looking at her without judgment. Her life had been filled with people misunderstanding her actions or questioning her presence. But this man saw only a tired woman who needed shelter. Jacob walked to a small trunk at the corner of the room and took out a thick blanket. He placed it gently at the end of the bed. Then, without drawing attention to himself, he laid another blanket on the floor for his own sleeping spot. You can rest now, he said softly. Naya continued studying him, as if trying to understand the strange way he moved, slow, careful, and always respectful. Her eyes softened slightly, the tension in her shoulders easing just a little. She walked toward the bed, her steps unsteady but determined. She touched the blanket with her hand, feeling the soft fabric. And for a moment her expression shifted into something vulnerable, something close to relief. You are kind, she said quietly. Jacob smiled faintly. Just doing what anyone should. But Naya shook her head. Not everyone does. She lay down slowly, closing her eyes for the first time without fear. Jacob turned off one of the lamps and settled on the floor, pulling his blanket up to his shoulders. The cabin fell into a still, peaceful silence except for the wind outside. After a few moments, Jacob thought he heard Naya speak again, her voice softer than a whisper. Safe. Here. Jacob didn't reply. He didn't want to break the fragile trust forming in the room. The storm raged outside. But inside the cabin, warmth and quiet wrapped around them like a protective wall. For Naya, it was the first night in many weeks when she felt the world wasn't chasing her. For Jacob, it was the first night he realized his quiet ranch might no longer stay as predictable as he once believed. As the wind howled and the fire continued to glow softly in the corner, the tired Apache woman drifted into deep sleep, and the rancher on the floor closed his eyes with a small, strange feeling in his chest, a feeling he didn't yet understand but couldn't ignore. Tomorrow would bring questions. Tomorrow would bring choices. But tonight, all that mattered was that a stranger had found safety. And a quiet rancher had opened his door, without knowing how much it would change both their lives. Morning light slowly pushed through the cabin window, touching the wooden floor and warming the cold corners of the room. Jacob opened his eyes and blinked. Remembering he had slept on the floor, his back felt stiff, but he didn't complain. His first thought was of Naya. He lifted his head slightly to check on her. She was still sleeping, breathing softly. Her face finally relaxed after days of fear and exhaustion. The blanket tucked around her rose and fell gently with each breath. For the first time, she didn't look like someone running from the world. She looked like someone who had finally found a moment of peace. Jacob tried not to make noise as he stood up. He moved with slow, careful steps, boiling some water for tea and checking the fire in the stove. The storm had passed, but the air outside still looked cold. He wasn't sure how long Naya would stay, and he didn't want to rush her. All he wanted was to help her feel safe for as long as she needed rest. After a while, Naya stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and she blinked at the sunlight. For a moment, she looked confused, as if she wasn't sure where she was. Then she noticed Jacob by the stove, quietly pouring tea into a cup. Something in her face softened when she remembered the kindness of the previous night. You slept on the floor, she said softly. Jacob smiled a little. I've slept in worse places. She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable at first. then slowly turning thoughtful. She sat up carefully, holding the blanket around her shoulders. "You did not have to do that." "I know," Jacob replied. "But you needed the bed." Naya lowered her gaze, almost shy. She seemed to be trying to understand how a stranger could be so gentle without wanting anything in return. In her life, kindness was rare, and trust was not given easily. But the rancher's quiet behavior was beginning to pull down walls she had built for years. Jacob placed the warm tea on the table and stepped back so she wouldn't feel pressured. Naya approached slowly, touching the cup with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her skin. She sipped quietly, then looked up at Jacob again. "You are different," she said. Jacob tilted his head a little. "Different how?" "Most men talk too much," she answered honestly. "Or they look at me like they expect something. But you—" She paused, searching for the right words in English. "You look at me like I am a person, not a problem." Jacob felt a small tug in his chest. He wasn't used to hearing things like that. He didn't see himself as special. He simply treated her the way he believed anyone should be treated. He didn't say anything, but she could see the sincerity in his silent response. After drinking her tea, Naya offered to help with chores. Jacob tried to tell her she should rest, but she shook her head with quiet determination. "Working makes me feel alive," she said. Not afraid, so Jacob agreed, keeping tasks simple so she wouldn't strain herself. They stepped outside together. The ranch glowing under the morning sun, the storm had washed the land clean, leaving everything fresh and bright. Naya breathed deeply, the air filling her lungs with new energy. She helped Jacob feed the horses, though she moved slowly. The horses sniffed her hands curiously, sensing her hesitation. Naya smiled softly at them, speaking a few gentle words in her own language. The animals seemed to relax, as if they understood her peaceful nature. "You're good with them," Jacob said. She shrugged lightly. "We grow up close to horses. They listen if we are calm." Jacob watched her as she smoothed her hand over a mare's neck. There was a quiet strength in her movements, a natural grace that came from years of living close to the land. He respected that. He admired it more than he expected. As they worked side by side, Naya began asking small questions, curious ones, shy ones. She wanted to know why Jacob lived alone, why he chose a quiet place instead of the town, why he didn't have a family nearby. Jacob answered honestly. He liked simplicity, he liked open space, and life had simply never brought him the right person to share it with. Naya listened carefully, glancing at him now and then with thoughtful eyes. After a while, she paused her work and suddenly touched his arm lightly. Jacob froze, surprised by the soft contact. Naya looked up at him with a quiet seriousness that made the air feel still. "You let me sleep in your bed, rancher," she said slowly, her voice almost trembling with emotion. "We'll have babies." Jacob nearly dropped the hay in his hands. His mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. He wasn't shocked in a bad way, just completely unprepared. The meaning of her words echoed in his head, confusing him. Naya, what do you mean?" he finally managed. She blinked, realizing he didn't understand. She lowered her gaze and explained gently, "In my culture, this kindness is not small. When someone gives safety, when someone gives their place to rest, it means trust. It means a bond." She looked up again. "Not babies now. Not like that. But a future. A promise. A connection." Jacob felt heat rise to his face. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. He hadn't done anything with the intention of creating a bond or promise. He just wanted to help a tired woman survive a cold night. But hearing how deeply she interpreted his actions made him feel something he couldn't quite name. "Naya," he said softly, choosing his words with care, "I didn't expect anything from you. I didn't do it for any promise." "I know," she said quietly. "That is why it means so much." Her simple honesty struck him in a way he didn't expect. She wasn't joking. She wasn't confused. She was expressing gratitude in the only way she knew. Shaped by her traditions and her heart, Jacob took a slow breath. "I'm honored," he said gently. "But you don't owe me anything." Naya nodded. "I know, but I choose to feel this way. I choose to say it. I choose to trust you. I choose to trust you." Her words were steady, calm, and sincere. Jacob felt something shift inside him, a soft, warm feeling that settled deep in his chest. He looked at her, standing there with the morning sun touching her hair, her eyes steady but vulnerable, and realized he cared more than he realized. The rest of the day passed quietly but with a new softness between them. While cooking, Naya hummed a melody Jacob didn't recognize. While repairing a fence, she asked him about his childhood. While sweeping the porch, she told him a small story about her grandmother. With each hour, their understanding grew warmer, deeper. When the sun began to set, Naya sat on the porch step, watching the sky turn gold and orange. Jacob joined her, sitting at a respectful distance. A peaceful silence settled between them, not awkward, not uncertain, just comfortable. "You gave me something I lost," Naya said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "What's that?" Jacob asked. "Trust." Her voice trembled slightly but remained steady. "I have not trusted anyone in a long time." Jacob didn't speak, he simply listened. She looked at him, her expression gentle and sure. "I do not know what tomorrow brings," she said. "But today, I feel safe." Jacob nodded slowly. "I'm glad you're here, Naya." And for the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled without holding anything back, soft, warm, and real. The ranch, once quiet and predictable, now felt different. Something new had begun, something unexpected, something quietly hopeful. Neither of them knew where it would lead, but both felt the same thing in that peaceful moment. The beginning of a connection that neither of them had planned. Yet both of them needed more than they realized. The next morning began with a soft stillness that felt different from the day before. The storm had washed away the dust, leaving the sky bright and clear. Jacob stepped out of the cabin early to check the fences before the sun grew hot. When he returned, he found Naya already awake, sweeping the cabin floor with quiet focus. She moved with a calm rhythm, her long hair falling gently over her shoulder. When she heard him enter, she paused and looked up, offering a small, shy smile that made Jacob feel unexpectedly warm inside. "You don't have to do all that," he said kindly. Naya shrugged lightly. "I want to. Your home is peaceful. I like to help keep it that way." Jacob didn't argue. He understood that work gave her comfort and a sense of belonging, so he simply thanked her, and she nodded gratefully. After breakfast, Naya joined him outside. She didn't ask permission. She just followed with natural confidence, as if she belonged there. There was no awkwardness between them now. They moved like two people, slowly learning how to share the same space, careful but comfortable. She offered to help with the horses again. Jacob watched as she approached a young stallion who was usually skittish around strangers. But Naya knelt beside him, speaking in her soft, melodic language. The stallion lowered his head, sniffed her hand, and accepted her presence, as though they were old friends. Jacob raised his eyebrows, impressed. "You have a way with them," he said. Naya smiled gently. "Horses feel what we feel. If our heart is calm, they trust us." Jacob found himself thinking about her words long after she said them. He wondered what she felt when she touched those animals so easily. He wondered what she felt when she looked at him with that steady, quiet expression. Throughout the morning, Naya asked more questions about his life. She wanted to know how he learned to build fences, why he chose ranching instead of town work, and what his dreams were before this quiet life began. Jacob answered honestly, though he kept his story simple. He'd grown up with little, worked from a young age, and built the ranch with patience and hard effort. He didn't seek grand adventures or big crowds. He liked living close to the land. Naya listened to every word. Her curiosity wasn't loud. It was gentle, like she wanted to understand him deeply, not just politely. When the sun rose higher, Jacob offered her a hat to shield her from the heat. She held it for a moment, studying it quietly, then placed it on her head with a small laugh. "I look like a rancher now," she said playfully. Jacob felt his chest tighten with a strange mix of joy and surprise. He wasn't used to moments like this, light, soft moments that made the day feel special. They spent the afternoon repainting part of the barn. Naya was careful with each brushstroke, taking the task seriously. Jacob worked beside her, noticing how easily their bodies matched pace. Sometimes their hands brushed when reaching for the same tool, and Naya would glance at him with eyes full of unspoken thoughts. He didn't know what to say, so he simply smiled, and she looked away with shy warmth. Later, while preparing lunch, Naya paused and asked, "Jacob, why are you alone here?" He hesitated. It was a question he had asked himself many times but rarely answered out loud. Finally, he said, "I guess I never found someone who fit this life. Not many people want the quiet." Naya nodded slowly. "Quiet is not empty," she said. "Quiet can be full." Jacob looked at her, wondering if she meant something deeper. But she turned her attention back to the food, leaving him to think. In the evening, Jacob decided to show her something special. He led her to a hill behind the ranch, a place where he sometimes went to unwind. The walk was slow and peaceful, and Naya stayed close beside him, her steps matching his without effort. When they reached the top, she gasped softly. Below them, the land stretched wide and endless, glowing with warm colors as the sun lowered in the sky. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Jacob nodded. "I come here when I need to think." "What do you think about?" she asked. He took a long breath. "Life, future, decisions, things I'm afraid to say out loud." Naya looked at him gently. "What are you afraid to say?" He didn't answer immediately. He stared at the horizon, feeling words form inside him but unsure if he should speak them. Before he could decide, Naya touched his arm, light, steady, warm. Her touch surprised him every time. She wasn't forceful. She wasn't shy. She simply reached out when her heart told her to. "Jacob," she said softly, "you are good. You are steady. You give without wanting anything back. That is rare." He didn't know how to respond. Compliments like that didn't come often in his life. He cleared his throat and looked down at the ground, trying to hide the warmth rising in his face. Naya continued, her voice even quieter now. "When I told you those words this morning about a promise, I was not speaking lightly. In my heart, those words mean trust, respect, a future that can grow." Jacob felt his breath catch. She looked at him so openly, her eyes deep and sincere. She wasn't demanding anything from him. She wasn't trying to rush him. She was simply telling the truth of her heart. He swallowed, unsure if he should speak. "Naya, I didn't expect you to feel that strongly. I don't want you to feel tied to me because you were tired or scared." Naya shook her head. "No. I feel this way because you gave me safety when I had none. You didn't question me. You didn't fear me. You didn't ask for anything. That kind of kindness makes a bond in my heart." Her words touched him in a way nothing had before. He didn't know what to do with the feeling growing inside him, soft, warm, hopeful, and confusing. Jacob had lived so long with quiet routines that emotional understanding felt unfamiliar. But he knew one thing for sure. He wanted her to stay safe, to stay comfortable, to stay close. The sky grew darker, and the first stars appeared. Naya looked up at them with wonder, as if seeing them for the first time in years. She wrapped her arms around herself softly. Though the air wasn't cold, Jacob slowly took off his jacket and offered it to her. She hesitated, then accepted it, slipping it around her shoulders. The jacket almost swallowed her, and Jacob couldn't help smiling at how small she looked in it. She noticed his smile and returned one of her own, gentle, grateful, and filled with quiet understanding. When they walked back to the cabin, the silence between them wasn't empty. It was warm, full of meaning, full of unspoken thoughts that neither knew how to express yet. Inside, Naya sat by the fire while Jacob prepared tea. She watched him move around the cabin with soft eyes. When he handed her the cup, she held his hand for a moment, longer than necessary, not tight, not demanding, just a soft reminder of everything she felt but had not yet said. "Jacob," she whispered, "I am not running anymore." He sat across from her, his heart beating faster than usual. "Where will you go when you're fully rested?" Naya looked at him for a long moment. "I do not know yet. But, for now, I wish to be here." Her voice carried no pressure. It carried only truth. Jacob nodded, and a quiet relief spread through him. As the fire crackled softly and the night settled over the ranch, both of them felt the same quiet understanding. Something real was forming between them. Slow, steady, natural, and safe. And even though the future was uncertain, the connection growing between the rancher and the fugitive Apache woman felt like the beginning of something neither wanted to lose. The next days passed quietly, but a new feeling hung gently in the air between Jacob and Naya. They worked side by side, shared warm meals, and spoke more openly than before. Neither tried to rush the other. Their bond grew naturally, like a seed finding sunlight. Jacob had lived alone for years, yet Naya's presence felt as if it had always belonged on the ranch. And for Naya, each day made her heart lighter, as if the weight she had carried for so long was finally lifting. One morning, as they were tending to the horses, Jacob noticed something different in Naya's behavior. Her movements were slower, more cautious. She kept glancing toward the distant hills, her eyes narrowing slightly as if searching for something. When Jacob stepped beside her, she gave him a small, careful smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Something wrong?" Jacob asked softly. Naya hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I feel someone is near." Jacob looked toward the wide land beyond the ranch. He didn't see anyone, but he trusted her instincts. She had lived close to nature her whole life, and she sensed things he could not. He didn't question her further, but he stayed close to her for the rest of the morning. Naya tried to act normal, feeding chickens, carrying wood, brushing the horses, but her mind seemed far away. She kept listening for sounds Jacob couldn't hear. By noon, she finally spoke honestly. "My people may be looking for me." Jacob slowly set down the tools he was holding. He waited, letting her take her time. "I left without speaking to anyone," Naya said quietly. "They must be worried. They must be confused." She looked at her hands, twisting them nervously. "They will come to bring me home." Jacob felt a small ache in his chest, but he didn't let it show. He respected her people. He respected her connection to them. "Do you want to go back?" he asked gently. Naya looked at him quickly, as if surprised he would ask something so direct. Her eyes softened, and she stepped closer, her voice quieter. "I don't know," she whispered. "My heart feels many things. I feel safe here. I feel calm here. But my people, they are part of me." Jacob nodded. He understood more than she expected. He knew how important roots were, how strong family ties could be, even when they were complicated. He didn't want to influence her choice. He wanted her to feel free to choose her own future. Later in the afternoon, they were stacking hay behind the barn when the horses suddenly lifted their heads, their ears pointed sharply toward the hills. Naya froze. Jacob turned, watching dust rise in the distance. Riders, 4 of them, moving slowly but steadily toward the ranch. Naya stepped closer to Jacob without thinking, her breath catching in her throat. She wasn't afraid for her safety. She was afraid of what this moment might mean for her future. Jacob placed a calm hand near her, not touching her but offering presence. "It's all right," he said gently. "You're safe." The riders came into clearer view. They were Apache men, proud, strong, dressed in traditional clothing. Their faces held seriousness. But Jacob also noticed something else. Worry. When they reached the open yard, they halted their horses. The one in front stepped down first, his face lined with concern. He looked at Naya with a mix of relief and frustration. "Naya," he said with a heavy breath, "we have been searching for you for many days." Naya lowered her gaze, guilt touching her expression. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I needed time." The man, who appeared to be older, maybe a guide or elder, nodded slowly. "Your family feared something had happened to you. They asked us to find you and bring you home." Jacob remained quiet, letting Naya speak for herself. He didn't step forward or claim space. He simply stood behind her, his presence steady and respectful. Another rider, younger and more impulsive, looked around the ranch. "You stayed here?" he asked Naya, sounding confused. "In a stranger's home?" Naya lifted her chin slightly, her voice steady. "He is not a danger. He helped me. When I was tired. When I was cold. When I needed a place to think." The elders exchanged glances. Their expressions softened, seeing the truth in her words. Jacob finally spoke, calm and respectful. "She came here scared and worn out. I only gave her somewhere to rest." The older Apache man studied Jacob for a long moment. He wasn't looking at his clothes or his tools, he was looking at his character. Something in Jacob's steady posture and honest eyes seemed to reassure him. "You treated her well," the elder finally said. "We thank you." Jacob nodded. "She is a good person. I only did what anyone should." But Naya knew not everyone would have done it. That was why her voice trembled slightly when she looked up at Jacob, her eyes shimmering with unspoken emotion. The elder turned to Naya. "Your home is waiting. Your people want you safe." Naya looked toward the distant mountains, where her village lay hidden. She imagined her family's faces, their concern, their love. She imagined the familiar paths she had walked since childhood. A deep part of her longed to see them again. But then she turned back to Jacob, standing sturdy, gentle, and quiet beside her. In his presence, she felt something she had never felt in her village. A sense of choice. The elder continued softly. "You may return with us now." Naya didn't answer immediately. She exhaled slowly, then asked a question that surprised everyone, even her riders. "Do I have to choose today?" The elder looked at her with patience. "No," he said. "You choose when your heart is ready." The younger rider looked confused, but the elder lifted his hand, signaling silence. He respected Naya's spirit. He respected her need to understand her own path. Naya stepped closer to Jacob, her voice so soft only he could hear it. "I do not want to lose the peace I found here." Jacob felt something tighten in his throat, but he kept his expression calm. "You won't lose it," he said gently. "Wherever you go, it stays with you." But Naya shook her head. "It stays because you are part of it." His breath caught, and he looked at her with warm, uncertain eyes. He didn't know what she would choose. He didn't want to influence her. But a small, quiet hope grew inside him. The elder watched their exchange with careful eyes. He stepped forward again. "Naya," he said softly, "you may stay if you wish. We came only to tell you that you are not alone. Your people care for you. But the path you walk is your own." Naya nodded, emotion filling her chest. The riders stayed only a short while longer. They shared words with Naya in their own language, reassured her, and reminded her she was loved. Then they mounted their horses again. Before leaving, the elder looked once more at Jacob. "You have shown respect," he said. "For that, we honor you." Jacob bowed his head slightly, grateful. As the riders turned toward the hills and began their journey back, Naya watched them until they disappeared. Her heart was full, confused, warm, and uncertain all at once. When the dust settled and silence returned, Naya stood beside Jacob, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the weight of the choice before her. Jacob looked at her gently. "You don't have to decide today." Naya turned toward him, and her voice came out as a soft breath. The wind moved gently through the grass, and the wide desert seemed to wait with them. Naya's eyes held a quiet storm of emotion, love for her people, comfort on the ranch, and a bond with Jacob that had grown deeper than she ever expected. And in that calm, uncertain evening, she realized something important. She would soon have to choose where her future belonged. And with whom. The day after the riders left, the ranch felt strangely quiet. Not an empty quiet, but the kind that settles after something important happens. The wind moved softly through the grass, the horses grazed peacefully, and the sky seemed larger than usual. Yet inside Naya's heart, everything felt full of thoughts, memories, hopes, and questions she could no longer ignore. Jacob worked near the barn, repairing a loose plank when he felt Naya's eyes watching him. She stood by the porch, her hands gently folded, her expression calm but serious. There was something different about the way she looked at him today, something clearer, deeper, as if a decision had begun to form inside her. Jacob set down his tools and wiped his hands on his jeans. "You all right?" he asked. Naya nodded slowly. "I need to talk to you." His chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Of course." She walked toward him, her steps soft against the dirt. She stopped a few feet away, close enough that he could see the quiet determination in her eyes. She looked like someone who had finally found the courage to face the truth inside her heart. "I have been thinking," she said gently, "about my people, about my life, about this place." Jacob didn't interrupt. He waited, listening with the same patience he had shown her since the day she arrived. "When I ran away," Naya continued, "I felt trapped. Not because my people were unkind, but because I felt I had no space to breathe. Everything around me felt heavy, like a weight I could not carry anymore. On the road, I thought I would never find peace again." She looked at him with soft eyes. "But then you opened your door." Jacob swallowed, unsure how to respond without pushing her decision. "You gave me water, you gave me food, you gave me your bed. You gave me trust without asking for anything. And slowly, something inside me changed." Jacob felt his heart beating harder, though his face remained calm. "This ranch," she said softly, glancing around. "It feels like a place where my heart can rest. It feels warm, quiet, honest. It feels like I can be myself here." Her voice shook just a little as she added, "And you, Jacob, you feel like someone who sees me, truly sees me." Jacob exhaled slowly, because no one had ever said words like that to him. Naya stepped a little closer, her voice lowering. "My people gave me a choice. They said I can return when my heart is ready. They told me I am free to follow my own path." Jacob nodded gently. "That's good. You deserve that freedom." She smiled softly. "I know, and I am grateful. But now I must decide where my future belongs." The wind brushed lightly through her hair as she looked at him with a searching gaze. Jacob felt that moment stretch into something deep, something that carried years of meaning inside a few seconds. "Naya," he said quietly, "whatever choice you make, I will respect it. Your happiness matters more than anything." Her eyes softened even more, touched by his sincerity. "That is why the choice is not so hard now," she whispered. Jacob's breath caught. He didn't move. He didn't dare to hope. Not fully. Not yet. "I want to stay," she said simply. The words hung in the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. Jacob blinked, almost unsure he heard her right. "You want to stay here?" he asked, his voice low and careful. Naya nodded. "Yes, I want to stay on the ranch. With you." Jacob didn't speak for a moment. His heart felt full in a way he never expected. He stepped closer, but slowly, so she never felt pressured. "Are you sure?" he asked, needing to know it was truly her decision. She reached out and touched his hand, her fingers warm and steady. "I am sure. This place has given me something I lost long ago. Peace." And you have given me something even more important. Trust. Trust. Jacob felt emotion rise in his chest. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet, powerful warmth that spread through him like fire. I'm honored, he said softly. Naya smiled, a smile that held relief, hope, and a hint of joy that had been missing from her face for far too long. You opened your door without knowing who I was. Now I choose to stay because I know exactly who you are. Jacob let out a slow breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The next days felt different, not rushed, not overwhelming, but full of gentle new beginnings. Naya made herself at home, not as a guest, but as someone who had found where she belonged. She cooked meals with more confidence now, humming softly as she moved around the kitchen. She worked beside Jacob with a sense of purpose, sharing laughter and stories of her childhood. She taught him a few words from her language, and he practiced them clumsily, making her laugh in a warm, affectionate way. In return, Jacob taught her small things about the ranch, how to fix a loose hinge, how to repair a water trough, how to recognize the moods of the horses. She learned quickly, and the pride in her eyes made Jacob smile more than he had in years. One evening, as the sky turned orange and gold, they sat together on the porch. A peaceful silence settled between them. Naya leaned back against the railing, watching the wide, open land she had come to love. Jacob glanced at her, studying her calm expression. Do you miss your people? He asked gently. Naya nodded. Yes. I miss them. And I will visit them. But missing them does not mean I must live there. My heart has room for both. Jacob understood exactly what she meant. They'll be glad to see you again. Yes, she said softly. And when I return to them, I will tell them the truth. What truth? Jacob asked, his voice a little quiet. That I found someone kind, she said. Someone who didn't judge me. Someone who made me feel safe enough to trust again. Jacob's breath softened at her words. Naya looked at him with warm eyes. I said something to you once. It slipped from my heart before I could think. I told you that. Because you let me sleep in your bed. We would have babies. I did not mean it the way it sounded. I meant that kindness builds a future. A future built on trust. Jacob nodded slowly. I understand now. She smiled gently. I want to build that future, Jacob. Slowly. Carefully. With peace. With time. Jacob felt something settle inside him, something steady and hopeful. I'd like that, he said. Very much. They sat there together, watching the last colors fade into deep blue. The ranch felt like a world of its own, quiet and full of promise. In the distance, the horses grazed under the night sky. The wind moved softly across the open fields, and Naya, who once arrived tired and lost, now sat beside the man who had given her shelter, choosing him not out of fear or confusion, but out of understanding and trust. The future was uncertain, but they would face it side by side slowly, gently, and together.